2016 U.S. presidential election. That was propagated by the Russians. And now you have people like Rudy Giuliani and maybe the president himself accepting what the Russians originally came up with.
And just to put this in some context, what have we been saying for 3 years? Donald Trump will not criticize Vladimir Putin. As Nancy Pelosi said in her finger-pointing meeting, why do all roads keep going back to Putin? This is another example of a difference between his top senior officials and what they see and what the Intelligence Committee sees, and then what Donald Trump wanted to do. I think it's also worth pointing out at the beginning of her statement, she makes a big point of saying, I'm here as a fact witness, I am nonpartisan, and I am here for the truth. She is also representing people who are not testifying today, namely John Bolton. She was his top aide, and I think people are going to be looking very closely to see what she can say about what Bolton
But where
did.
the hell is John Bolton? You know, why is he not testifying? Why doesn't he walk in there and testify? She has an interesting line in her testimony where she says, I believe that those who have information that Congress deems relevant have a legal and moral obligation to provide it. John Bolton apparently has a legal and moral obligation to give speeches for money, to have a $2 million book contract, to talk about all these issues. But when the Congress of the United States is deciding impeachment, John Bolton has to go to court to say no. I mean, what is that
I
about?
agree with that, and I think that what Fiona Hill, what you just read, Jim, I think is very much coming from John Bolton, who is a Trump appointee, who is a hardliner, and who thinks this was completely inappropriate. But I agree with you. Then he ought to come forward and actually say it, because that gives you some window into the fact that there was an official track of foreign policy, and there was a rogue track, but it wasn't one person. It was from the president to his lawyer, perhaps Secretary of State, and others who were involved. There's another piece, too, the humanity of these folks who are foreign policy experts who serve the government. Fiona Hill spending time on her biography, who she is, where she comes from, her dedication. We have a president who has dismissed these professionals and these Foreign Service officers and their commitment, saying things that always have sexist overtones like, oh, the woman, and I don't even know who she is. And he says it about men, too, just to dismiss them as faceless bureaucrats instead of seeing what America can see, people who are dedicated not only to their expertise but to serving the government.
You know, it's interesting, Andrew, the president clearly, he's fixated on all of this right now, getting ready to watch more of this dramatic testimony. He just tweeted this, and I'll read it to you. I never in my wildest dreams thought my name would in any way be associated with the ugly word impeachment. The calls, transcripts were perfect. There was nothing said that was wrong. No pressure on Ukraine, great corruption and dishonesty by Schiff and the other side. You can see he's obviously getting increasingly concerned by what's unfolding during these hearings.
He is, and he should. What he's hearing in these hearings are an existential threat to his presidency, and for good reason. I think it's really important, the comments that you, Jim and Jamie, made about the Russia implications here. It's not just that he subverted U.S. policy for this fictitious theory about Ukrainian meddling in the election, which, by the way, the absolutely unanimous conclusion that it was Russia, not Ukraine, is a conclusion based on fact. The United States government has detailed hard forensic evidence of the Russians' engagement in that meddling. But so he adopts a conspiracy theory propagated by Russia with the effect of withholding security assistance that would have been used to battle Russia in Ukraine. So it's not just his adoption of conspiracy theory is in line with Russian goals, but the effect of that adoption is to deny our ally the aid they need to fight the Russians on the battlefield.
And she makes the point, Kerry, this is Dr. Fiona Hill, President Putin and the Russian security services operate like a super PAC. They deploy millions of dollars to weaponize their own political opposition research and false narratives.
You know, a lot of the story of the Trump presidency has been about foreign influence. That was really the main part of Volume 1 of the Mueller report. It was about foreign influence, and it was about the 2016 campaign's openness to receiving that foreign influence. What we've seen be uncovered about the summer and the early fall of 2019 is that pattern continuing. The Trump campaign, this time the Trump 2020 campaign, willingly wanting foreign assistance and embracing and trafficking in conspiracy theories that are feeded by foreign influence and by foreign governments that are hostile to United States interests. And Dr. Fiona Hill is a subject matter expert on Ukraine, on Russia, on that region of the world. And I think her testimony is going to be incredibly compelling and a real warning about the current situation that the United States is in. And the president is using his very powerful use of social media, over 60 million followers, I think. And that's something that we see, that we worry about, those of us in the national security space, that we worry about authoritarian governments using new technologies, using social media to influence how their citizens are thinking about things. And so it's very concerning.
Certainly is. Very
Just to put it another way, what did the president always say? No collusion and no obstruction. What we have seen with Ukraine is collusion, again, between the United States and a foreign government to try to help him win the election, and obstruction. No witnesses produced voluntarily, no documents produced voluntarily. Collusion and obstruction. It's what happened with Mueller, and it's what happened with Ukraine.
Everybody stick around. There's a lot more. We're following the arrivals of Dr. Fiona Hill and David Holmes. They're set to testify moments from now. We're on top of all these fast-moving developments. Chris, this is going to be powerful.
It is. It's going to be the culmination of the first part of a very important process to our democracy. And not to be forgotten, 10 Democratic candidates squared off as the impeachment hearings were consuming Washington. How did it fit into the debate last night? What did they have to say about this? And who made some points for themselves last night? We have much more coming up.